Hey everyone, sorry about that. It seems like we inadvertently put out the wrong link and everyone started joining us. So we've
No, it
got
was me. You can tell them. I'll take
well,
responsibility for it.
we've got it all under control now. So you'll probably will watch this on a replay because we're trying to get the links out right now. But anyway, we're going to be talking about weather apps tonight. We have Brad Panovich on, Evan Stewart, and Kevin Seeley to join us tonight to talk about the good and the bad of weather apps. Since we're running a little late on time, I'll go ahead and hand it to Ricky as he will conduct the interview. And I'm going to be on social media trying to get this YouTube out so you guys can be watching and asking questions. So, Ricky, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Sky. Sounds like we need a Carolina Weather Group app that just sends out everything. You know, we don't even have to send out the social links. But
or just
the world
invite Kevin again.
Well, I mean, we had James Spann on here with no issues, Kevin, so I don't know. You even showed your hat. So.
Oh, I should have brought the hat. Doggone it.
We've got the Blizzard of '93 show coming up later, so.
Yeah, and that's going to have Brian Peters, so I hope we don't have more of that coming.
No, this is, I've been invited on a different one.
Oh, okay. I thought it was...
Our sports guy came by to say hello. It's Tobin McDuff.
Gotcha.
Hi, Tobin.
Yeah. This isn't going well from my end, is it?
Well, at least the power hasn't gone out or anything yet for you.
You have to, hey, to make up on this, Kevin, you have to give us a shout out on Weather Breeze.
Okay. Cool.
But that, as Scotty mentioned, our topic tonight is weather apps, and I think a good baseline to start with this is just for people who maybe aren't familiar with all the different types of weather apps out there, and this can go to any of the three of you. Talk a little bit about kind of how the transition from maybe web versions of weather went over to the app version. A perfect person to talk about this because you're a technical guy.
I'm sorry, who'd you go to? My connection was breaking up. Was that me?
I mentioned Evan, but I'm not sure he can hear us.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was on your end.
Gotcha.
Repeat the question.
So, for people who kind of don't understand how we've gotten to this point, we've gone from basically the world of internet website weather to more of the world of app weather. Talk a little bit about how we've gotten to there, and from the TV side, how stations have had to adapt to that.
Well, I think the first thing is, when you're developing these apps, of course, you've got several different platforms that you have to deal with, the iPhone and, of course, the Android. And when I started 20 years ago, the stuff that you put out on the web was just very basic. And now, since you've got the ability, I mean, you can pull up live radar and all that sort of stuff now, with radar scope and those sorts of things. I just think that the information out there is just so much, there's so much more out there. And that's probably not really answering your question in the best way. I'll defer to Brad and Kevin, but I just think that television stations have developed these apps over time, and I know our group has gone with the Weathercaster app, and we've kind of abandoned a couple other apps that are out there, but still the folks with the older phones, they might not be able to progress over to those newer apps. So I think for us from a television standpoint, it's just making sure that everybody can get the information out there and get the information on their cell phones as best they can.
I'll add to Evan's comment if I can, and look more, I think, maybe from a historical perspective. When you go back to the dawn of the web, in my opinion, what happened was the broadcasters in a given market and across the country looked and said, oh, the internet, here it is, that's cute, but we're still the big 900-pound gorilla in our markets, and maybe we don't have to fool with that, until it gained critical mass. And then the same thing happened with social, and I don't want to go off in that direction just now, but my point at the time of the dawn of the web and afterwards was television as a business looked at the internet and said, okay, I guess it's hit critical mass, we need to be there, we don't maybe really understand it, and it clearly is not showing a way to make tons and tons and tons of money right out of the gate, and so what we're going to do is just port our existing content over into a web form, which didn't work. The web was not television, and I think the same thing happened in the mobile space, where there's clearly no giant monetization path right out of the gate, and so they kind of went, okay, well, let's port a lot of automated stuff, which is what most of these apps are, into yet a smaller form factor, and see if that works out, rather than coming up with something new and native for each platform as we've gone along. And that's happening now, but behind the curve. We've gotten a little bit better on the web. We're still in this only automation phase in apps, and I think it's terrible. And I think that's one of the reasons that, James on Weather Brains is constantly referring to them as crap apps, because they're all automated. And I really believe, and I would love to hear from the other broadcasters, Brad, you back me up, I think one of our few remaining advantages in this space as television broadcasters is the level of personality. And I don't mean the comic stuff, but the level of personality and human connection that we can bring, because, the automation, as far as forecasting temperatures, with certain exceptions, is not bad. Does John Q. Public really care if it ends up being 56 degrees on a day that the automation or the human forecast 55? No, he probably doesn't even know the difference. But the level of interaction and personalization and communication, and yes, entertainment that we can bring, I think is one of the only things that we've got left. Brad, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's funny, when I talk about apps and modeling and automation of kind of stuff like this, I'm a tech guy, so I love the technology, but you almost swing the pendulum too far to the automation part of this. And I always relate apps to, and I totally agree with James and the crap app moniker, because a lot of them are. They're just, it's garbage. I kind of relate it to people who have credit cards or billing issues, and they call that automated number to get like the bill balance. That's great. If you want to pay your bill and you want to call and get the, what's the balance on your credit card, it's great. But when you have a real problem with your bill, or there's, or you lost your card or something, you want to talk to a person. You want someone at the other end of that to kind of help you through the process. And this is what the apps are missing. There's no human element to the forecast. And what Kevin brings up is something that I think is important as well. Modeling is getting great. As you mentioned, yeah, the models on these apps are going to be pretty close to the temperature. But when you have big events, the model has no idea of uncertainty. I mean, if the model one day says there's going to be snow, it just throws snow into the forecast. Whereas if I saw something like that, I might say there's a small chance of some snow on day 4, but the chance of that happening is like 10%. You don't get that uncertainty or that feel from an app. And the other part about it from a TV standpoint is, and Kevin could probably back me up on this, is like we don't have app developers in our business. We need people that do this, because what we're doing is we do one of two things. Either we try to do TV on mobile, which doesn't always work well, or we just automate it. And to me, I'm a big fan of doing different content for every distribution method, and not trying to take one thing and trying to, a square peg and put it in a round hole, which I think we try to do way too often.
Well, and one of the problems you get to there is all of a sudden for the human there becomes a time and motion question. I mean, we have this, over this evolution of the last, 15 years or whatever it's been, we keep adding things because we think we have to be there. And that's just another thing that you have to do in addition to being on television. And I'm starting to wonder if it's maybe time to start going back and either pruning, or what I really have wanted to do for a long time is to get to this idea of write once, read everywhere. And I'm not saying that, I'm not opposing what Brad said about different content for different platforms, but at least have or develop a platform. It's just software, a content management system that allows us much more easily to effectively use multiple platforms. And I kind of talk out about both sides of my mouth on this, because I look at Social News Desk, for example, and I know Kim Wilson, who started that thing, and I like her a lot. I have a lot of respect for her for starting a successful company from scratch. But at the same time, I'm a little frustrated in that what she did was enable this flood into social media in a way that, or without, I think, looking at the consequences of it and what we would have to deal with and what we are dealing with. We've given so much power to Facebook, not only in the weather enterprise, but as an industry, that now we're just left sitting back going, okay, well, whatever you want to do to us next, Facebook, we'll take that from you, and we have no other choice. And I think that was a colossal mistake.
Right. I spoke to a bunch of high school students yesterday, and this actually kind of came up, and we talked about the art of forecasting versus, just using the computer models, which is what these apps do, and that the future of meteorology, there's still the need for that human intervention, and that's what we broadcasters can give. And as Brad mentioned, that's what's really missing in these apps. As you said, Kevin, the personality, but also just being able to go in there and look at it as a human and still be able to decipher which model we lean to. We have no choice with these apps which model, it's WSI's RPM or whatever is out there. That's what's leading these apps, and that's what people are seeing, and that's where the broadcasters still have that advantage, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quality control issue, if you ask me, more than anything. Yes. It's like, I'm not opposed to doing some type of model forecast, a blender maybe that we can adjust, but it still needs a set of forecasters' eyes on it before it goes out to the public, because, as you know, I mean, oftentimes if we were to go strict with model data, we would have literally hundreds of Category 5 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, according to the GFS, and we would have a blizzard every other week on the European model. I mean, but we look at that and we know better. We would never okay, that's going to happen. But your app doesn't. Your app doesn't know better. It has no responsibility. It has no morals, no recourse. It just floods out whatever data it gets. And part of the problem too is there's a lot of free data out there. I mean, the government makes, the National Digital Forecast Database is just sitting there. Anybody could grab that data. The Weather Underground had their API was wide open. You could go grab data from them, and Forecast.io, I think, even has a lot of their API open. So what happens is you get non-meteorologists now grabbing this free data and building an app and not understanding exactly what this data means. And I see that as a problem as well. Brilliant app developers taking meteorological data that they don't understand and just flooding it out to the masses. So you have multiple issues when you start building these apps and you don't really know what you're sending out.
You touch on a really important point too, Brad, that the industry has not locked onto yet. Back in the 70s, or whenever you want to say, back in the day when it was just the television news, you could collect one big giant audience, and those people didn't have any choice as to what they saw. They saw what you gave them. But now there are, as Brad said, literally probably tens of thousands of choices on where to get your weather. And the reality that we have not come to grips with yet is that it's not, I don't think it's possible even to get the same one mass large audience. The audience is fractured into smaller and smaller and more groups. And so going back to my idea of write once, read everywhere, why don't you have a very, very simple app? Because some people will use it. Why don't you have a medium complicated app? Because some people will use it. And then why don't you have one, or at least a space in there, where you can get the discussion of the cutoff low over the four corners and why it's going to do what it's going to do or not going to do what it's going to do? Because there are some people who will take that. The only way to get a large audience anymore is to aggregate a bunch of smaller ones, but you can't do it with the exact same product for all of them.
And Kevin, that's a good point, because I'm sure we'll get into this, and I don't want to steal Ricky's thunder, but at some point you're probably going to ask us what apps we use. And honestly, I don't use just one app, because I use different apps for different things. Like I have a radar-only app, I have a METAR app, I have an upper air sounding app. I literally have an app for every type of weather phenomena that I want to look at. So I think you're right, Kevin. I think in some ways we need to make apps for different audiences, because, for instance, RadarScope, which to me, bar none, is the one weather app I use more than anything, all it does is radar. And there's no forecast information in there. And this app, it costs $10. It's very well done. It's got great data. I even recommend it to amateurs and laymen, because I think it's that good. But in reality, you're just giving meteorological data, and it really needs interpretation even there to be a radar scope. And I think that needs expert interpretation. So I do think that's interesting. And I think as a station, sometimes we need to think about that. We need multiple apps for every part of our audience.
Absolutely. And I will extend that discussion, because you said a moment ago something that triggered in my mind something I've tried to say a lot, in the idea that apps, I think are most effective when they are task specific. Brad says he has a bunch of different ones for different things, and I think people, you cannot say everybody or all people like one thing anymore, but I do think that people like their phones or their tablets because they can get a specific task done, and they will go to that. What again has not been realized by the industry, and I'll not mention the name of the company, but I know of one company that put out a quote-unquote station app where it had the news and it had some sports and it had some weather and it had a bunch of stuff, crammed into that one little small package. And then sometime later, they had the opportunity to put out a weather app, a designated weather app, and the consensus among management, mistakenly so in my opinion, they sat and they looked at it and they said, well, I don't think we're going to put out this designated weather app for fear that it might cannibalize the big all-in-one app, which is exactly the wrong digital thinking in this world, because what it meant was somebody who doesn't want to drill down through all the other stuff to get to the weather on the main app is going to go to the Weather Channel or going to go somewhere else, and you've lost that person, as opposed to putting out what people want and people need and giving them the options that they need.
So how do we transition, though, from these big mainstream media apps? You've got the Weather Channel app sometimes, which is automated. You've got the one that comes default in the iPhone, which is automated, one that comes default in Google+. And how do we transition into getting the people to move towards their local apps? Do we just start naming it like the Charlotte Weather app, the Dallas Weather app, to where they make it personalized a little bit?
Yeah, I think the key is enabling us to the content creator to put in the content rather than relying on the automation. And I think I see signs of that happening. I think what's going on now broadly is the companies are looking back and going, okay, well, we ceded responsibility for, the web to World Now, and they did our websites for so long. And that turned into a disaster because they were all just templated and they weren't very flexible. But I see signs that companies are now trying to bring some of this stuff back in-house. That's going to take a while. And I think the next realization after they figure out how to do it in-house will be to do what we're talking about, is to enable the people, the local content creators, I hope, to create that content and get it in there, because the automation is just there's no competitive advantage to it. I think the competitive advantage comes when you can say, okay, here's Ricky or here's Brad, and he is in your phone and he is doing this for you, rather than just feeding data into it because it's cost effective.
Yeah, and I agree, Kevin, because with automation and the amount of free information out there, only thing you can do as an app developer now with the automation is make it a prettier package. I mean, that's you're taking the same information and trying to make it prettier, but when you dig down, the data is the same. I actually am not opposed to individual apps, like you said, like the Weather Brad app or the Kevin app, because in some ways that's something to sell, and I think that's something that's unique. Or even market specific. I think if I had a dream goal, if I could just do apps, I would want to make these human weather developed type apps where you could mine local forecasters in every part of the country and pull that data somehow. So when I go to Wichita Falls, I'm getting Kevin's forecast, and when I'm in Birmingham, I'm getting James' forecast, and when I'm in Norfolk, I'm getting Evan's forecast instead of automate, because it's like you moved. If you go buy a house, you want a local real estate agent that knows that market, knows the homes, can get you a deal. You're not going to somebody based 3 states away that's going to do it remotely, but yet we're doing that with our weather information, which is really not the best way to do it.
And you know what? I think you're exactly right, but I think that is an idealized world that we are never going to see because of the competitive landscape. Right? What that would require is your company to say, okay, to my company, yeah, we're going to share data at some level. And I've talked to people about this type of content management system and making these data points universally available. And I think it makes great sense, but I think the competitive nature of the companies is never, ever going to let that happen. I kind of had this theory that maybe, pardon me, that the Weather Channel might have been working in this direction.
Yeah.
Because I saw this outreach toward local stations, and now they have this big presence with NBC. And for a while, short time, I remember seeing Weather Channel videos on the WGN website. No, it was WGN content on the Weather Channel website for Chicago, and WGN is not the NBC affiliate there. That's out of the ownership group. And so I started to wonder, well, could they put themselves into a position where they're sucking in all of this data and distributing it for everybody? But I don't think that's going to work in a competitive landscape as well because of the NBC connection. The ABC O&Os and the CBS O&Os and the Fox O&Os are not going to get into bed with them in that. I think you're exactly right. That would be great, and let people pick and choose. It would be ideal if we were all on the same platform, all on a level playing field, and then it's just the guy that works the hardest and provides the best data who wins, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think from a competitive standpoint, we're not going to see that.
Well, when everybody's owned by Gannett and Sinclair, we can all share information.
Exactly. You mentioned, you said, pretty. I've given pretty a lot more credit in the last couple of years. I used to just wonder why people would go out and buy a Mac computer because they would rave, oh, it's so pretty, and I thought, what are you talking about? It's a box and it sits on the floor and it computes. Who cares what it looks like?
Yeah.
But it does matter to people, and I saw that really strongly. It's been what, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when Yahoo updated their weather app and went to that picture format, and they've blown it since then. But I remember reading.
You mean the wrong city for the picture?
I think
over.
Yeah, I think they've done. Well, I'll tell you a developer problem. But what I saw, it wasn't last year. It must have been the year before. That thing came out in like March or April of that year. And there wasn't really anything different about it other than the look, right? It was still all automated data, but it was really pretty, and it had the the Flickr group that was providing the pictures, which was a neat thing. But between late March or April, and middle to late summer, the Yahoo Weather as a presence on mobile saw a 150% increase in traffic and usage. Just because of a cosmetic change, and I think people just loved it because it was interactive. Now I think their latest updates I think have ruined it because, and this is a problem with a lot of apps. Now instead of just seeing the picture if it's raining, you get this little animation and the little raindrops slide down the screen, which is cool for about 5 seconds, but then it's just annoying because it's bogging down the phone, right? And what happens with these developers is they get to a point where they get bored and they start putting in stuff because they can rather than because they should. And that happened with the CBS app. They didn't have anything for a long time. The O&O stations didn't go with the rest of the crowd. Thinking about in Dallas when I was there, pretty much everybody had the WSI app, and it was ugly and it was just not very functional. It was not very useful. So they decided to go out and try and build their own, which was all automated data. But it was horrible because the user interface was so bad. And I can just envision a bunch of people sitting around a table in New York saying, "Well, we got to look different." Yeah, I suppose you do, but it has to be functional. This thing had this kind of spinning carousel that was really choppy, and it was like, how do I get to this? And that just drives me, and I'm getting on a rant here, but that drives me crazy on a lot of apps because these phones have developed now where there's so much flexibility in the hands of the developers, which can be a good thing but can also be a bad thing. Most of us just want to get our work done, right? You don't want to have to remember, am I supposed to double tap in this app, or am I supposed to swipe, or am I supposed to do this or that or the other thing? You just want to get your work done, and we're evolving to this point of complicatedness, which I think is really kind of frustrating.
Right, Kevin, I want to go back to something you said earlier, and my mantra at work is to work smarter, not harder. Yeah. How do we as broadcasters, serve all these masters that are coming down the line, whether it's radio, newspapers, apps, Facebook, Twitter, webpage, Google+, and on air? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I keep trying to look toward this, this sort of master content management system, and going back to starting to look for things, to starting to prune to things that make sense, right? I've been kind of tossing this example around lately. We're all on Facebook and we're all on Twitter, and I just can't get off into my rant about social media, but why isn't everybody on Pinterest, right? I mean, Pinterest has a giant audience. It's mostly female, which is the target demographic and the age group that we want. Why hasn't everybody gone headlong into Pinterest like they did into Facebook, which is a much worse experience for the user and for us? So I think we have to start looking, and I don't know if the corporations will let us, because they just want to pile on because it's another little chunk here or there that they feel like they seem to need to be in. But I think some pruning and better content, universal content management systems. Again, I think Kim was in the right direction where she created this content management system. I just wish it hadn't been to Facebook and Twitter.
It's almost like there's almost too many different types of platforms out there. Because I mean, there's anything when you come to weather apps, from the kitten and the puppy weather app to your scientific upper air sounding app. So how do we go into making, you know, just the one thing that people want to see? Is it just we need to have only the forecast and that's it? Or does it need to be an app maybe that has some variability? So on days when there is rain, it's got more features. On days where there's a threat of something else, it can pick up something else. Yeah,
I would stop you at the comment where you said, how do we get to this one solution? And I don't think you can do that anymore. I've written about this, I think, a couple of times on my blog, and probably talked about it on Weather Brains as well. And this came from, there's a great book, it's some years old now, called The Long Tail by Chris Anderson. I highly recommend that everybody read it. It's about moving into the digital age. But one of the biggest lessons I got out of that book was you can no longer ever in anything say people want. You have to say some people want X, some people want Y, some people want Z. And if you can afford, by cost and or by time in motion, to serve X, Y, and Z, okay, good luck to you. But if you can't, you're going to have to pick a group or a couple of groups and serve them. Because the minute you try and start to serve everybody, you can't do it. You cannot serve everybody. In fact, it reminds me, I was really lucky last year to go to a very small group of people that met up in Dallas with Vic Gandotra, who used to be one of the top dogs at Google, and he has since left. But we were talking about Google+. And in addition to that conversation in the group, I actually had a chance to visit with him by phone earlier last year, and he was very generous to give me about a half hour's time. We talked about a lot of things, but he made me realize something very important, because he wanted to talk a little bit about weather, and I was saying, well, hey, Vic, you know, since you want to talk about weather, here's what we need you to do with Google+. We need you to do X and Y and Z, and he was very tentative, but he very politely shot me down at the end of it, because he said, well, Kevin, the problem is the minute I fork this thing or accommodate you doing the weather, then every other special interest group in the world is going to ask me to fork this for their interest. And on a global platform, that doesn't scale. They just can't do it.
Good point. So let's transition a little bit from maybe how the apps have kind of got to this to some of them that are out there. And Brad, do you want to comment on kind of the different types? You've got your weather forecaster app, which is all about the animation or automated data. You've got some of those that are human inputted. But specifically, I want you to hit on maybe like the Forecast.io apps and other apps like that, which try to give you minute-by-minute information.
Yeah, Dark Sky. All right,
yeah,
so this is an app that I think on its surface, it's gee whiz, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you exactly when it's going to rain here. The problem is that app was developed by non-meteorologists, and so they didn't know the limitations of what they were trying to do. You're giving a level of specificity that is not exactly doable. Not to mention, what they were already doing was kind of being done by short-range modeling like the HRRR. I mean, the HRRR essentially was developed to kind of do this on the short-range, high-resolution forecasting. So you have this apps, and there's a whole series of them now. I don't think, Dark Sky is not just the only one that promises the user, we will tell you if you walk the dog at 3 o'clock this afternoon whether you'll get rained on or not. And that sounds great, but when you don't deliver on that promise a couple of times, guess what happens to your app? It gets thrown in the trash. So those type of apps, I think, initially get a big download and a big buzz where people are like, oh, this sounds awesome. But in reality, that's not the way the atmosphere works. And the dark sky issue that they had was with convective initiation, where they could only forecast rain if it was already on the radar. So if you have a sunny day, and Kevin can speak to this, we all can, you know, the typical hot, humid spring or summer day where you wake up and you're like, ooh, there's going to be big storms this afternoon, and there's not a cloud in the sky at 8 a.m. All right, because all the stuff that's going to happen is going to be heating, and the cap's going to break. That's something that app will never be able to do, because it doesn't know that those storms are going to develop, and then they have to be tracked once they do develop. And then I won't even get into the storm scale structure of storms and how that's almost impossible to forecast accurately. So, you know, you have apps like that. And then you have the hour-by-hour forecast, which I will admit is the most popular part of any app. Yep. The app that we have, Weathercaster, Evan and I use, to me, I'm not always happy with the data, but that is the best part of the app. It has a 48-hour, hour-by-hour forecast, and I get more comments of people like, boy, I love having that hour-by-hour forecast. And while that is a great feature, that you run into the same issues. One model run, the hour-by-hour forecast may say one thing. The next model run, the hour-by-hour forecast might get tweaked a little bit. So you always worry about people that go to their app once and then expect it to stay that way for 48 hours and never go back. To me, a successful app, and this is from a marketing, money-making, is you want an app that people will go to multiple times, maybe even in an hour, a day, a week. Exactly. You should. That's why what Kevin was talking about, like, serving one thing is great, because if I just want current temperatures, I'm going to go back all the time just to get the current temperatures. If I give you everything at one time, there's no reason to come back to the app. And if you're selling ads in an app, you want impressions, so you want people to come back as much as possible. So those are the apps that Ricky's talking about that have some drawbacks to them. And we do hour-by-hour forecasts on the air as well. There's drawbacks to those. I will change them all the time. I just think you got to be real cautious of overselling and under-delivering on those type of promises.
And Evan, going off of what Brad said, trying to get people to come back to the apps, how do we do that? I mean, and Brad, you can comment on this as well. I mean, do we maybe send out a push notification from that app that tells people, hey, you know, the forecast has changed. Now, you know, larger storms expected this afternoon, or temperatures expected to be colder than before, something along those lines?
Gosh, I mean, that's tough on so many levels. We were having this discussion at work today. Just, you know, how much do you provide to people on Facebook or Twitter that, you know, because we're still serving our broadcast master, we're still serving these other masters as well. So how much information do you give, you know, to keep everybody happy, you know, to keep keep the ratings up as well? And I think that's an issue of broadcasting. But yeah, you know, there's only so much, you know, we can do as one person. So, you know, relying so much on that modeling, you know, right now, I think that's really all we can do at this point.
Brad, going off of that, it kind of reminds me of your weather radio comment that I've heard you mention a few times, to where, though, if we tell them that something is going on, won't it drive them back towards the app, or maybe even drive them towards TV if it's a larger event?
Yeah, and you guys might remember this back. I remember when, you know, the weather radio thing was becoming big, and we were trying to push it on air, and I had several news managers at the time, this is probably 10, 15 years ago, who didn't want us to promote weather radios on the air, even though they're a life-saving tool, because they looked at it as competition. That if you have a weather radio, why do I need to? But when you look to dig down to the research, when people have weather radios, it was like an alarm to tell you to go watch TV. Right. When the weather radio went off and there was a tornado warning, the first thing people did was grab the remote and go turn on the TV to see what's going on. So in theory, as a broadcaster, yeah, you want people to use the app as much as they can. But if they're at home, we all know that when people are watching TV, they have second and third screens. They've got a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone open as well. You want that to be kind of like an alarm to say, hey, there's something going on with the weather. You need to turn over to Brad's station to see what's going on. So in theory, that is what you want to do, because when that person's not in front of the TV, great. You can get your mobile revenue when they're at work or they're out biking where they don't have access to a TV. But what you're hoping is that when they're home, you can use the app to push people back to TV. And you, Ricky, you asked about how do you get people to use it more often. Well, this is a dilemma. All broadcasters, you're seeing it at the Weather Channel. How do you get people to get interested in the weather when the weather's not interesting? And you're seeing a lot of people. What they do is they hype. They make, and I think that's the one night stand of TV right there. Trying to get people interested in something, and then they realize that it wasn't that big of a deal, and they regret it later. So all that stuff looks great. It's short-term benefit, long-term it's gonna kill you. So I think in the short term, when you don't have weather, there's so many cool things that we can do as meteorologists, whether it's talking about space weather, astronomy, photography. I know a lot of us in this group love photography. I think that's a great way to get users on the app to get involved with you, to share and interact with pictures on even sunny days when there's great sunsets or great clouds. I think there's other things in nature and just staring at the sky and science that can draw users into your app when the weather isn't very interesting.
All right. And then going from there, why don't we just dive straight headfirst into the favorite weather app thing? And we actually did a poll on our group and our event page and asked people, what's your favorite weather app? And the one that came in first was actually WeatherBug with 22 out of about 45, 50 responses, with RadarScope coming in second, but probably favored a little bit towards the weather nerds in the group. And then Weather Channel and Weathercaster coming in third and fourth representative. But it's interesting to me that a lot of people, love the WeatherBug thing, and I wish we had some comments as to why. But it makes me wonder what they do differently. And for people who have the AccuWeather app, they have got that minute-by-minute thing, and we talked about that. But I wonder if people still, see that as beneficial.
I'll tell you why WeatherBug, and I like the WeatherBug. I tell of all the generic forecast-driven apps besides our own Weathercaster, which I must plug. I do like WeatherBug because I'll tell you for two things. One, it's their Spark feature, which is the lightning detection. That and of all the apps I've seen, that is a phenomenal personal public safety part of that app that is just amazing. The fact that you can use your GPS location, it'll tell you color-coded green, yellow, red, whether you're too close to the closest cloud-to-ground lightning strike. That feature alone makes that app amazing. The second one is what I was just referring to earlier. When the weather's boring, WeatherBug has great cameras all over the country. So you can go on their app and look at live weather pictures and video at any time. To be honest with you, their forecast part of their app is probably the worst part about the WeatherBug app, but those other features are so cool that it draws you in. And I use the WeatherBug app strictly for the Spark feature, and because of that reason. So Ricky, I kind of agree. I love the WeatherBug app. The other nice thing about the WeatherBug app is, and I don't want to throw the Weather Channel or AccuWeather on the bus because I think those are great companies and great people, but if you're a weather enthusiast, you kind of look at those as like the Walmart of weather, It's like you don't think it's very personalized, you just think it's generic. It's like going to McDonald's every day. And the WeatherBug doesn't have that kind of negative brand recognition. I think it's got some kind of coolness to it, and so I think people tend to maybe go towards that a little bit more.
I'm muted. There we go. All right. And since you brought it up earlier, I'll throw this to all three of you. And Evan, you could start if you'd like.
Okay.
What apps do you use?
I'm probably not in the norm. I do so much more on the computer and not on the apps. But yeah, I do have the WeatherBug app. I have the old WSI radar app, which our stations are abandoning. I think RadarScope for the radar is great. That's what we use in our storm chaser when we're out chasing the storms. So, those are the ones that I lean towards. And a lot of it is just to make sure that what we're saying on air and the forecast that we're giving is being replicated in the apps that we are, as a television station, are sending out, so that we are sending out that consistent message.
I'll go since Kevin looks like he froze.
I'm here.
Okay, I was going to say my number one app is RadarScope, and I'm just looking at my phone right now, and I have radar scope outside of my weather folder. I use it so much I don't even want to go into my folder to grab it, so I keep it outside. But within my weather folder, I use WeatherBug. I got Hurricane Pro, which is a great, really just I use for tropical. It's a great hurricane app. I use NASA Space Weather, Hurricane Impact, the Weather Underground, Storm Pins I have in there, which is a great picture app. WeatherSat when I want to look at satellite, and MPing, one of my awesome all-time favorite apps, really for citizen reporting, crowdsourcing the weather. And then I have Aero Weather for all my METARs, because when I want to look at current conditions, I go grab that. But I don't really have the Weather Channel or AccuWeather. I only real forecast-driven app I have, I would say, is probably our Weathercaster app and WeatherBug. And the one thing I'll say about our Weathercaster app that I like, it's mostly to monitor for what we're sending out, but also it is clean and simple. Even from a weather geek standpoint, I do like that it's just minimalistic, clean, and nice and simple. I wish we could add a couple more features, but I could see why that app is popular with a lot of our users, because it's just hour by hour, 7-day forecast radar, and that's it. That's the basics.
What Brad was trying to say for all you weather app developers out there is he would love to be a beta tester of any of these apps that are coming out.
Yes.
Kevin, how about you?
Well, I have many of the same ones that Brad and Evan do. Aero Weather, yes. WXSat, radar scope. I used to like, until it got complicated, that Yahoo Weather app because of the photo thing. I'm a big photo guy. I had a lot of my photos, seated around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it was a kick for me to see them come up. I particularly liked that one. I was in a meeting with some television executives one time, and one of the women was looking at it, and she had Paris on her one of her cities in the Yahoo Weather app, and obviously it's a picture of the Eiffel Tower or something in Paris. But I watched her very carefully use that app, and there's something very special and intimate about a phone or a tablet because of the touch interface. There's something tactile about it. But she was almost, just kind of stroking this thing in a longing way where it was very personal to her and very important. And at one point she said, at the end of the conversation, she said, "It makes me happy." And I don't think that you can ask for a better response for somebody than to make them happy, because you're making a connection with them. I think that should be the goal for everybody in whatever you're doing, is to make your end user happy. The two that I would add that I use a lot is WX Radar. That was one of the first ones. It was developed by my friend Paul Prance in Atlanta, and it just pulls the sector radars from Ridge, the Weather Service, and it's just a nice task-specific, one-click way to see the regional radar. I get to see Texas and the surrounding areas, so I go to that. And quite frankly, the other one I use a lot because I want to just keep tabs on what the Weather Service is doing. I love this one. It's called WX Alert USA, and it's just pulling Weather Service data, and I can see what they're doing at a moment's notice, and I love that because it keeps me in touch with them and what they're doing. So in addition to Radar Scope and the others that those guys use, I would add those two.
I have a comment, and I just got turned on to this last week. And Brad, I don't know if any of you guys have it. I believe it's only for iPhones, but it's called Weather Geek, and it's kind of a simulation of all the different model runs that you can download and look at. So I
do have that app actually. That's John Gum. He's a meteorologist up in Cincinnati. He used to work with him in New Orleans. He developed that app.
I've just, like I said, downloaded it last week, and I found it really useful. It's really helpful. Another thing I know that our organization, Burke Weather, is we're really pushing MPing with our area here in the foothills of North Carolina. And every rain event, or even when we had that sleet last week, we pushed that app out. Hey, give us a report of what you're seeing, and it's really lit up in our area of North Carolina. So I think that's a really good hands-on, and it's a free app, and kind of gets the users out there. They can be their own meteorologists and forecast, or not forecast, but tell what they're seeing out their own back window. So it's a pretty cool app that we really integrated here in the western part of North Carolina.
Yeah, big fan of the MPing app. I try to push that as much as possible. I appreciate guys doing that too, because I think North Carolina, between us and the guys up in Raleigh and Nate Station, I think we've got a lot of MPingers in the state of North Carolina. It's amazing when you got a big event how many reports we get in.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it gets everybody involved, and it always is helpful because, I've been to your station, and I'm sure Kevin and Evan as well. We don't have windows out at the station there, so you can't really tell what's going on. So,
yeah.
Good thing to have.
I just got to get that in TrueView Max somehow. I got the ice file for GR, and I just need to get that in Max. I know there's a way to get in Weather Central, but man, if I could get that into our system, because it's nice when you overlay those reports on the radar. It is a really good story to tell. It really is.
All right, guys, I have a viewer question, and it's probably the question that we've kept all of our viewers hanging on through 2 separate YouTube links and holding on for this entire hour. But Lynn sent this question in. She also says, Happy National Weather Person's Day to everybody tomorrow, a day early. But she wanted to ask you, in her words, what is the best weather app for a dummy? For somebody, for the layman out there, what should she go? She should go get, and obviously, I'm sure Brad's going to mention the Weathercaster app and things like that. Jump right on it. Go ahead and plug yours. That's fine. But what would you answer to that?
Well, my answer would be don't use the stock app on your phone. Whatever the stock app is, like the one that's shipped with the iPhone, the stock app shipped with Android devices or Windows, get away from the default one. But there's so many good ones out there. I mean, it's hard for me to really pick and choose. I mean, obviously, I would push ours just because I think from a simplistic standpoint, it's great. But the Yahoo app's great. The Weather Underground app is very nice because their API I think is really well done. And I do like WeatherBug. I do think WeatherBug does a decent job. But I always think, like with any app, it's great to check. But I think you should always try to check with a local guy. Stay human. Get a local forecast. Use the app to maybe check the temperature, and if you see something fishy in the forecast, hit one of us up on Twitter or Facebook or email or whatever way you can. I think that would be a great way. I often wonder if we shouldn't put that on our app. Like when you're on our Weathercaster app, there should be like Ask Brad a question. It sends me an automated tweet or something right from the app. Would be kind of cool. They could ask me about something in the forecast.
When's it going to snow? I already got that.
Yeah. You could have a preset button that says, "What time will it get to my house?"
Yes.
How much rain?
Be like the NPing drop-down menu. Like, pick from these stock questions for the
right.
week.
Question would you like to annoy Brad with today?
We also posed a question on our event page, and I'd like for you guys to comment on this. It's talking about how long or the amount of time that you trust your weather forecast that you see on your smartphone. The overwhelming response was 32 people said that they trusted it 2 to 3 days out. 12 people responded that they only trusted it for that day. 8% responded never, which was all of us weather geeks. And then 12 people responded that they trusted the whole 7 to 10 day forecast. And then 8 people responded they don't trust it after 5 days. So what is your those low numbers, but what is your response to those? I mean, a lot of people trust it at least 3 days out in advance.
Wow.
Yeah, I would love to jump in on that, and people I think are going to, you have a fairly broad range of answers, which is good, and again, people are different, so you can say some people want this, some people want that, but I wanted to share, I think what I hope is a related story. I was, I'm new here in Wichita Falls, only been here a couple of months, so I was in line at the grocery store the other day, and there was a woman there with her college-age daughter, and she was standing in line. She turned around and she recognized me, and we had a few minutes of polite conversation where she was welcoming me to town and so on and so forth. But as she was talking, she realized the daughter, who was probably 19 years old, didn't have the vaguest idea who I was. So at one point she said, "Well, he's the new weatherman on Channel 3." And the girl kind of looked back and she went, "Oh." And I was like, "Oh, that's fine." And so I wanted to dig on that a little bit. And so I looked back at the mother and I said, "Well, she probably gets her weather information from her phone. Is that right?" And the girl said, "Yeah." And I said, "What do you use? Do you have an iPhone?" She said, "Yes." "Are you just using the one that came on the phone, or have you downloaded any weather apps?" She says, "No, I just used the one on the phone." And so I talked to the mother for another moment or two, and then the girl, I think, was feeling a little more comfortable as to who she was talking to. But she looked back at me and she very authoritatively said, "I look at the weather a lot on my phone." And that really struck me, because we have missed an opportunity to serve her with non-automated information on a continuous basis. Like this is what Twitter is now, and what the web is. It's a river of information. It's not an event anymore. Back in the day, the television newscast was the event. You worked all day and you prepped for this, and here was the event, and that's what it was. But now it's a river, and what people are doing is they're dipping in and out. And so if they come to your platform, whatever it is, a website or an app or whatever it is, and whatever they see, and this is what we're getting from the automated apps, at 2 o'clock is the same thing that they saw at 7 o'clock when they rolled out of bed, there's no reason for them to come back multiple times. You've got to update that thing continuously throughout the day to give them a reason to create a habit. And this was another thing that I read about the Yahoo app. It was a very long article about Marissa Mayer, and her goal for Yahoo was to try and create habits for people. And I think that's a key to anybody trying to get into this thing, is look to, number one, find out what they want and serve them. And number two, try and figure out a way to create a habit. Because if you can get somebody to do something over a period of time and you create a habit, that's the end of the game. You don't need to do anything else except just keep doing it.
Right, and I think the big question, and I don't want to turn this to a broadcaster's thing, but how do we convince our management, our bosses, that that's the route that we need to take? And when we're still stuck on the 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. or 2:30 to 11:30 work shift or whatever.
I think the only way, and I'm going to have to apologize and go here in a minute, but I think the only way is to just keep asking. My wife and I have said for many, many years that a good idea is not a good idea until the person that you're telling it to is ready to hear it. And they're getting ready to hear that. As I said earlier, I think they're realizing that they've ceded responsibility, and a lot of these companies, especially Gannett, are trying to pull this back. Whether it'll be successful or not, who knows? But they're trying to pull a lot of this stuff back in-house. And so top-of-mind awareness is an important thing. You just have to keep saying to your supervisor, and this is what I'm doing here, is, hey, remember that thing we were talking about? And they'll say, yeah, and then 2 weeks later, okay, where are we on this thing? And you just have to keep pounding on it. Otherwise, they're just going to forget.
All right. Well, I think we've had some really good discussions with all the different kind of sectors of where we've been, where we're going, and what we need to do. So, Scotty or Joey and Daniel, any final questions? Otherwise, I think we can wrap everything up.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming on tonight. And sorry about the technical issues that we had earlier today, but really learned a lot from this. And I hope the viewers who came on as well learned a lot as well. Joey?
Yeah, just backing up what Scotty said there. Definitely learned a few things. Even us guys, us weather nerds, kind of learned a little bit in there. Do apologize again for the technical issues we had earlier. I did go ahead and grab my bottle of whiskey after all of that. But anyway, but yeah, that like I said, that's glad you guys came on. Just a quick shameless plug, real quick, was that feedback going on there. But we you guys were mentioning the way the public kind of perceives the app and what we need to do. And I was going to say, we've got a show coming up. It's got to have to give you the date because I'm horrible with dates unless you send me a picture. But we got a show coming up with Dr. Laura Myers and Jennifer Watson of the Weather Channel. We're going to really dive into that the social aspect of how these people perceive these apps and just weather information in general. And I think I'm going to take a lot of what you guys talked about tonight. It's going to form some questions I'm going to ask Dr. Myers.
Yeah, that show's coming up February 25th at the end of the month. So, sorry, my dog was making a distraction here. I had to get check out on her, but yeah, that's why I had to cut off early. So yeah, guys, thanks for coming on. Any other questions before we kind of sign off here?
I'll just say thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it, and I'll take the bullet. I'm the one that caused the technical problems, and I apologize to all of you and your entire audience.
Oh, it's all right, Kevin. We'd love to have you back on anytime, as well as Evan and Brad. You're always welcome. As we always do, I'll let you guys kind of close the program, kind of promote your social media outlets, how we can get a hold of you, and we'll let you guys get off the TV.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's my first time, so hopefully I didn't mess it up too much. You can blame me for the technical issues, but of course, 13newsnow.com, and you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter at 13evanstewart.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Evan, and we're glad we got your audio fixed. So we're looking
Yeah, me too.
We're looking forward to having you back on. Kevin, you want to plug your social media?
Sure, thanks. It's Kevin Selle, KEVINSELLE on Twitter, and hopefully new things coming from KFDX television in Wichita Falls soon.
And you can catch Kevin on the Weather Brains most weeks, Tuesday nights, right?
Monday nights, but don't promote that show. No.
We're gonna finally wrap up. We got Brian Peters coming on in the next few weeks, and I'm actually going to be out in Oklahoma City at the end of the month. I'm going to try to get Mr. Smith on, so that will wrap up the whole panel of Weather Brain guests.
Hey, I'll do one shameless plug if I can. Really, for Weather Brains, we last fall we came up with a new logo for the show, and we made some T-shirts through an outfit called Teespring, and we're into our third run of the original one now. And the profit, we're not making a ton on each shirt. It's a couple of dollars, but we've got, I think probably now it's close to $500 raised, and we're gonna keep it in a cache somewhere until something in the weather community needs it. It's a Red Cross thing, or we get a big tornado or something, but that money will go to some need in the weather enterprise or after an event. And if you'd like to go buy a T-shirt, and there's a hoodie as well, and they're very reasonably priced and they're excellent quality, it's Teespring, and that's 2 E's, TEESPRING.com/weatherbrains, and you have until the 8th for this current one, and then we're going to take that one down. It's going away forever, and we might have something else in the spring, but I really appreciate you letting me plug that.
No problem. We're all going to go get T-shirts now. So.
Yeah.
Quick note: Teespring runs a little small. My wife uses them also for her office.
I would agree with that. Yeah, get a big one. Get a little bigger than you might think.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Panovich.
Not that everybody doesn't already know who you are, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, everyone can find me at WCNC.com, WXBrad on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Snapchat, Cyberdust. You can find me just about anywhere.
How many snow?
He still has a MySpace profile too.
Yeah, I should get rid of that.
How many snow questions have you got on Twitter today? Just today?
Oh, today, gosh, probably 25 or 30. The last week, I think because February started, it's like people are doom and gloom. It's never going to snow ever, ever, ever again anywhere on the planet. Or it's, they just want snow. So I love it. Those are my people. Because I'm the same way, and you can never be angry at people that are enthusiastic about weather. I think that's the one thing. If you're going to learn anything about apps or TV or anything, people love weather, and you can never get mad at them for loving it because it keeps you in business.
Yes, we have a follower up here. I think her name is Judy, and every morning update we do, where's the snow? Where's the snow? Where's the snow? Hopefully it'll come before the end of winter. But guys, thank you so much for coming on. I know Brad and Kevin's got to get going, so
thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you guys back on soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See you guys.
All right, guys. Well, I want to kind of run down what's coming up next week. We have Precipitation 101 with Grant Gilmore, Chief Meteorologist at WFMY in Greensboro, North Carolina, as well as Chief Meteorologist Brent Watts. He is at WDVJ in Roanoke, Virginia. So Grant and Brent will be joining us next week. And then February the 18th, we have All Things with Ari with the Weather Channel. And then February 25th, as Joey was talking about, Dr. Laura Myers and Jennifer Watson will be talking about all things social media. So that kind of wraps up the end of February, and I'll let Daniel promote the big show in March since he's been doing a lot of promoting on our Facebook page, and kind of let everyone know what's going on then.
Well, our big show coming up on Wednesday the 11th of March, we're going to be looking back, and that'll be just a couple days prior to the 22nd anniversary of the great blizzard superstorm of March 1993. We have Gary Stevenson, who's a meteorologist, our chief meteorologist at News 14 Carolina. He was actually working weekends at WLOS in Asheville, North Carolina. He's going to be on along with Rob Fowler from Charleston, South Carolina, and plus we got the other guest that Joey and him just added from Birmingham. I forgot his name.
Brian Peters.
Mr.
Yes.
Brian Peters. He was the morning coordinator meteorologist in Birmingham at the time. So.
But you know, that was that's really still the benchmark for winter weather events in our part of the country. People still talk to that, and it's been about that storm, and it's been coming up close to 22 years. So that's a big show we got for us on the 11th of March, and we'll continue to promote that very heavily. And for those who are watching tonight, share the word with everybody. Check us out on that date. We expect a lot of good things.
Yeah, I believe we already have, like, I don't know, 80-some people already commenting that they're going to be watching the show. So make sure to share that with our event. As the date approaches, we'll start to do some more advertising for it. So, guys, any closing comments or anything before we wrap up tonight?
No, don't forget we're on a podcast now. Ricky got that all set up for us so that everybody can go download that. If you're watching us on YouTube or whatever, you can always go back, download the podcast form of our show now. We're slowly getting all of our past events uploaded to that. So Ricky's working on that. Take no credit for that. It's all him.
Ricky's gonna kill me because I know we're trying to keep things concise, but we still have Evan with us.
Yeah.
And so he is on TV, and I want to get everybody's perspective of this. Evan covers Virginia, Ricky covers Charlotte area. We cover the western North Carolina. You guys think we've been getting a lot of questions? We kidded Brad around, but what do you think winter entails for the next, first, say, 3 or 4 weeks until we get into March?
Remember that blizzard we had back in April? That was the circus blizzard that one year, Evan?
Yeah, that was actually March 2nd, 1980.
March? Gotcha.
Yeah, March, and that's what I've been telling people is, 8 of the top 15 snows here in eastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina have been in February and March. They're pretty much spread out over the whole winter. So, another thing I remember is something that my grandfather used to tell me, who grew up here. I mean, our family goes back generations. Is never shed a thread till April is dead. Basically saying that anything can happen in March and April. It was a few years ago. We had the snow on Easter Sunday while Christmas was 70 degrees. So anything can happen.
Yep.
All I can say is, Scotty, I'm glad you brought up the snow debate again. But a lot of people are starting throwing into town. I just keep telling them, 140 years of records say we've always had some sort of snow. Granted, I guess we're due to miss one, but I mean, 140 years here tells me that 140 times in a row, I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the average.
I think an important point to make, and I would hope most weather people would know this, is that just because the GFS goes out to 20 days or goes out to 384 hours, doesn't mean that forecast of 384 hours for 70-degree temperatures is going to be correct. So you may be seeing the next week warm, the week after warm, but that may not actually verify. I mean, you could end up having temperatures the complete opposite of that and a giant low off our coastline. So
that's right. I mean, look at Monday. I am going to throw him under the bus a bit, but look at Monday. If the rain that we had Monday, if the storm had been about 1,000 miles farther south and it had been about 30 degrees colder, we would have had a foot of snow.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, one thing I do want to mention, and now it's been really weird. The whole month of January, it seemed like pretty much everybody on the eastern half of the U.S. was being shut out. But then you had the 2 big storms that have hit the big cities in the Northeast. You had the storm at Chicago, and them's got their snow now. I'm a little worried, and I don't know if for us in Western North Carolina we're going to get any snow, because it just right now on the surface it doesn't look good through the next 7 to 10 days or longer. But the fact that we are so late in meteorological winter, we're now starting to put a snowpack down across the Midwest, the Lakes region. I have to wonder, I think a lot of March is going to be in play now. I really do. It may be some really close teasing for anybody, especially, say, south of the Mason-Dixon line at times, but I think the cold air is not just going to vanish come the end of February. I think it's going to hold on into March.
I would agree with that. I mean, the old forecasting adage that snow begets snow, I mean, I think there's something to that.
And for us here in Western North Carolina, as far as a widespread synoptic event, I can't speak, guys. It's
Pass
been
the
a while.
fireball.
Exactly. It's been a while since we've really had that in March. It seemed like the last 4 or 5 years, all of our worst winter weather has actually come at this time of year, early February. We've not had it as much in March. This year could be different, I think.
Yeah, past few years here has been late December, early January that we've had the big snows. So, yeah, I think there's something to that.
All right. We'll see. We got, what, a month and almost 2 months still? It's only the 4th of February, so I don't know. We'll probably get a big 10-inch snowstorm on maybe, say, March 21st, that day where I need to do something outside in Charlotte.
Now, the one thing I will say for our followers up in our area, I do have a big brown paper bag ready to where if we do get shut out for the winter, I'm just going to put it over my head, and you guys won't see me until next winter.
Like I said earlier, I just need 7.7 inches at the airport in Hickory because I said it was going to be average. So just give me my 7 and we'll be good.
I'm just ready for severe thunderstorms. Just forget the snow. Let's bring on the warm and the convection.
you know it's bad when the Snoptimus Scotty Powell gets up on the winter.
I'm ready for sunshine and thunderstorms. So anyway, that's we'll see. We still have a month left, a month and a half left of winter time. So really, honestly, though, in North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, the old adage, if you don't like the weather, stick around for a few minutes and it'll change. A lot can and probably will change throughout the next month or so. So guys, we'll wrap it up there. It's been great to have everyone on tonight. Evan, we'd love, I'm extending the invitation back to you now that we got all the bugs worked out. We'd love to have you back, and I'll send you a list of our upcoming shows, and if there's something that piques your interest, we'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Well, I would love to be back. Thanks for inviting me on this time. I mean, we finally got it all worked out, so yeah, looking forward to it, and I'll see you guys soon.
Or if you have an idea of your own, you see one of our open dates, we'd love to take some ideas. It's a challenge to come up with a new idea every week. So
I can understand that.
Social media posting could be a good one.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, Evan.
And that's all I'll say about that.
Wrap it up, Scotty.
Well, before we get to the acts, thank you, Evan, so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And everyone have a great week, and we will see you next week on February 11th as we talk Precipitation 101 with Grant Gilmore and Mr. Brent White. So everyone have a great week. We'll see you next week.